is your, got it.
Okay, so yeah,
I'm so nervous. I feel nervous.
Oh, good. I mean, you should feel what you're going to feel. Yeah. This is a really good brewery in Oakland. Oh, it's not even on the screen.
So now there it is.
Oaklandia. It's a goth brewery I go to after I rock climb.
This is LA brewery.
Oh, nice.
So the funny thing about backgrounds is everybody's got a background now, and these are real books.
Wow, you just pulled it out of your background? It's that's great. That's an actual library. I'm stunned because
neat trick, right?
Yeah, totally. I thought it was an actual background. Oh my God. So this is an actual space city behind me.
Yeah. You designed and had built. You and Elon?
Yeah, right. Our new right-wing Elon, far right Elon.
Yeah, the Twitter.
Well, I went on Twitter. I was so disturbed. Since he's bought it, it just got impossible. It's like I don't want to do it anymore. I was doing it a little bit.
There aren't enough pictures on Twitter for me.
No. I don't know how informal we're gonna make this. Jane just walked into the kitchen, so she can say hello. This could be family, right? Okay, so we could do our usual. It probably would have been better with tequilas in hand.
Well, I have
like Joe Rogan, we could have light up a big joint or something.
In person, we could have done that. Yeah, we should have done that way. But here we are. That'll
be podcast 7 or 8.
Do you want me to introduce myself? Because if no one's going to know who I am.
Well, I'll do my introduction, then you do your introduction. So I met you at the Academy of Arts like 12 years ago or something. And
at least.
I don't know how I think we were assigned the studio together or something, but I immediately, as far as I'm concerned, you could speak for yourself, of course, I found this kind of like brother and, soul brother.
I agree.
And yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And and I had a lot of fun teaching with you, but I really thought the world of you, and as you've established your business, I really do think you're one of the most gifted architects in the Bay Area, at least.
That is very, very kind of you. I really appreciate it. I return the sentiment.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And plus you stayed rational after multiple tequilas and things like that.
And divorces.
Ooh, that too. Yeah, definitely. And so, the other thing is that you very much were about getting into your practice and like being a real architect, quote unquote. When you have, in my opinion, again, you have full capability of being an amazing, tenured professor. That's definitely in your brain.
It's interesting because I feel like, I try to walk that line, right? I mean, I don't know where you fall on this, but I mean, I think your tendency is more towards the radical, the theoretical. Those are things that you would do, I think, given all things. I mean, I don't know if how much of this we can talk about psychology or if that's part of on the menu, but
everything in this case, everything's in the menu.
Yeah. So, I think that, we've had these conversations, but I maybe out of fear, I certainly have been driven towards some of the practicality of architecture. It's, I have this conversation often with different people, and there's this tension between survival and, which I guess mostly means money, and, joy in a way, or love, right? I think that, I constantly vacillate and I never end up fully in one camp. I can think of any number of Bay Area architects that are, just about the money without naming names, right? I mean, they started a practice, they grew it, they became businessmen, right? They thought about what sells, what, and it wasn't about art or passion or anything. Or maybe they were passionate about business, but it wasn't about so much even the architecture anymore. And for me, and then there are others that kind of say, forget money, I'm going to take on one project every 3 years when an acceptable client comes along, and I'm going to teach the rest of the time or whatever it is in order to sort of fund my passion for architecture. And I guess I've never ended up in one camp or the other, but in many ways it potentially is out of fear of some kind of failure as an artist or some kind of failure as a business person. I mean, but certainly there is a drive to survive and make money and care for a kid and all those kinds of things that are fundamental. I mean, maybe there's a fundamental art component to it too, like a fundamental drive towards some part of who I am that I can't let go of that side of it. So I just end up ping-ponging back and forth between those polarities.
Yeah, I mean, you've been teaching a little bit off and on over the past since you left the academy, right?
I've taught some studios. The Berkeley thing ended up being, interestingly, a construction course. So I was teaching sustainability and construction, right, which probably was not my ideal, not the ideal fit for what I should be teaching. I mean, I know about these things, I understand these things, and we had talked about this. You and I had talked about how you might teach construction, right? And it would probably be through some very disruptive lens, let's say. But for me, it was it was to developers, and they wanted to know what's type 5 building, and that's what they wanted me to teach. What are the construction types? What materials are they made of? How does Portland cement work? What is aggregate? That kind of thing. So, it was very nuts and bolts kind of stuff. And, when we started this conversation about doing this talk with you, we had discussed the idea that I have other intellectual interests. And I think that, that just wasn't ideal. But I had sent you something about what we might discuss, and I've forgotten everything now. I guess I'm getting.
Oh, well, no, I could always open up all sorts of issues, but
yeah. Well, I had a couple of things that I was like, the one thing that occurred to me, I listened to all the other, well, not all, but I listened to a bunch of other stuff that you had been talking about. And one of the interesting things that wasn't on any of these emails that you and I were exchanging was that, the idea of, I was listening to the Marcus Novak talk really kind of fascinated me. And, there was this discussion around, I mean, obviously Midjourney and the stuff behind you there and the stuff that was behind him in that talk. And I've been messing with that a lot lately, as you may have seen. And, this idea of good, like good architecture or good design. And he was talking about, when you initially type in the prompt into this AI interface, you get something very, I forget his words, but it was kind of, very literal and ordinary. It's like you type in a couple of words and it gives you exactly what the words are. And then you type in some more words and you layer modifiers over it, or you change it, redo it, and you start to get at, things that are, and at some point the word good was used. And I thought about that. And, I really struggle with this idea. And this might actually tie back into some kind of psychology of, wanting to make everyone happy. I think that one of the things that I struggle with in that discussion that we were starting to have about vacillating between passion and some kind of financial or other success is that, trying to make everyone happy, would suggest that there is no good, right? Because if you have one client that likes one thing, you have a different client that likes another, or whatever the brief is, if you consider it all good, right? Yes is more, then, you can't disappoint anyone. So that is something that I've struggled with for a long time in my own work and career. And, I wonder about that notion. And I'm kind of curious because I feel like the interesting conversations we have are when we don't necessarily align on things. Because we've had conversations about what a good architect is, or, who does good architecture. And I like, what does that even amount to? Is there such a thing in your mind? I'm curious.
Are you going to interview me?
I want to know.
Yeah, well, and actually, I think it's better as a discussion anyway. So I genuinely appreciate your question.
No, it's going to be that way with us.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, it's an excellent question. Is there good architecture? I see so little of it. I don't really see good architecture.
But it's like somebody thought it was good, right?
But I mean, personally speaking, I think the media, this might descend into politics, but we should go where we're going to go.
Well, the media, are you talking about the architecture media?
Well, I'm going to talk about general media. I think the media in general, to me, especially in the arts, is fully blind. They are almost literally, and they're also deaf.
Was it you that I was talking to? Yeah. Was it you that I was talking to where we said that we were having this discussion and it was like, well, nobody's been told to like that yet?
I might have said that.
Right.
But
right.
You might have said it. Yeah.
That's what it about.
That's right. Well, it's like maybe I think part of you and I interacting again is we could probably break into whole new modes of thought that we should write down. But I think there's a bunch of different categories that we function in as architects, and you and I share the fact that we're struggling with practices, regardless of your success versus quote unquote versus my success.
Exactly.
Where we both have these practices, we make money from solving client needs of various kinds. And then again, we both met teaching, and I know that your capacity for intellectual curiosity and knowledge is as high as anybody. And I know that you can teach at any university you'd want to teach at. So I think we share that. And the architects that I liked, like my buddy Stephen Hall, he inspired me because of he had a foot in both areas, that he was absolutely trying to build decent stuff, but he was always a tenured professor at Columbia at the same time.
Do you think that he does good architecture? I'm wondering. I have
no. And he'll look at this. He'll look at this and say, "I'm not going to talk to you, dude." No, but I think that he's also, from what I know, a lot of these guys, including me, all of us, we have our issues about narcissism and ego. But Steve always seemed very approachable, and I think that he is probably one of the more self-reflective and self-effacing architects. By the way, I don't think he's so over the top as so many of these guys.
Do you yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. Yeah. And I think that what I'm feeling about architecture these days, which I spoke to you about, the times that we talk, I always enjoy them, is that it's being an architect who has like 30 coming on 40 years of experience, I've been working forever, it seems like. It doesn't seem that great architecture is achievable. And I think that
that was my next question. I was going to say, who is a great architect, or do you think or good architect, or do you think the work that you do is good, like that kind of thing?
No, I think that in practice, see, and I know this is a window. See, I do think that we align. Obviously, you and I align on a lot more than we think we're going to disagree on. But it's like, I think that there's a component in you that it'll probably allows us, it certainly has allowed you to work more effectively to get your message out when you build. When you've realized, I think, it's like operating from loss effectively.
Right.
And so Matt Baran, my perception of Matt Baran, and actually you've reinforced some of this when I've spoken to you, is that you have found a way to operate really nicely from a position of loss, because you've said, I'm letting my clients drive me, I'm letting them do that. I'll go where you said stuff like this to me, like I'm letting them.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I just said it 5 minutes ago, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just rephrased it. Yeah. So, I mean, but, having said that, though, I think that, and this may be very 21st century too, it may be of our time, all these mythologies have never been more exposed. And so, it's like, I remember visiting Le Corbusier buildings in Europe, and they were built terribly. They don't look that good. They get renovated, and then, Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings, so many of them are being saved from demolition. People just are going to demolish. And so, to me, there's gazillion and one art historians and architects that raise up, and certainly inclusive of the media, that raise all these people into these like untouchable gods or whatever. But I may or may not ever interview Bjork Engels, but I told you I walked around that building in Manhattan, the hotel that has one end pulled up.
Yeah.
And in terms of tactility, in terms of actual detail, I think I had mentioned this to you. It was awful. It was like a 60s mistake.
I'm interviewing you again, but what like Zaha, Corbu, like what art, like give me I know we can come up with lots of bad architecture, but like it's everywhere, I guess. I mean, see, now you've got me drawn in. Like, I'm like, no, this is just, I look at this, I look at all the terrible stuff, and I talk to my staff, and my staff is like, this client has bad taste, or look how we need more architects. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Like, all these buildings that are done and they're just thrown up, and nobody, like, there was a comment with Marcos Novak again, where it's like, there are people that just build and collect rent, and they don't care what it looks like. I think that was the quote. And I think that, but why do we need to care what it looks like? Everything needs to be done that way. I mean, there's a lot of arrogance and a lot of ego to suggest that every building needs to be designed by an architect, or sort of worse, every building needs to be designed by me. It's fine, or with unlimited budget, etc. It's just fine. Like, we can have all these different things because there's no truth. That's just somebody else's truth, and it's fine. Like, this is like a way of living. It's not just, to suggest that everything should be perfect. And I'm really frustrated sometimes when the people suggest right, and it's partly a very existentialist philosophy, because I think that if you look at existentialism, it's the idea is make your own meaning, right? Make your own meaning in life. You sort of say, this is what's important, and it admits that there is no truth, right? It's just your own truth. And so if you kind of apply that to architecture, sure, I know what I like, I know what I want to do, I'm going to try and do more of it, I enjoy it, it gives me pleasure, but I don't expect that everybody else would recognize it or agree with me, right? Because they have their own thing. And do you think there is a universe? This was a conversation we talked about Glenn Small. Glenn Small and I used to get into this argument all the time. He would say there was universal beauty, and he would throw out like Marilyn Monroe as an example.
Marilyn Manson, I'm sorry.
No, Marilyn Monroe, which is exactly like nowadays, right? I mean, the funny thing about that example is, like, Marilyn Monroe had more weight than we now accept as sort of universal beauty, right? Like, all the women in the TV ads and whatever else, it's like the internet ads, they're all skinny, right? They're like Barbie skinny, and that's our aesthetic. So it's actually very much proof that beauty and everything else changes with our our values in our society, and the media reflects that. Like things that are winning awards, it's like the spectacle. Now it's moving towards green. You know, it's like I was going to talk to you about metamodernism and like how we're seeing the shift from postmodern, which was like an anything goes. It was like modernism was the utopian period. Postmodern was like, all right, that didn't work. Fuck it. Everything's, you know, anything goes now. And then metamodernism is something that people are talking about now, where it's like, okay, it's a bit of a return to an idealism, but without the naivete of modernism. And so now you're seeing DEI and, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability. Like any awards program you enter now needs to have these boxes checked and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is this sort of cultural shift. You know, nobody looks at our work and, you know, the built work and says, wow, they did something there with basically nothing. Like everything was bought from Home Depot. It was under a certain budget.
Yeah.
And if there was a value, a societal value to like creating housing and working with zero budgets and being creative and using infill sites, then we'd probably be published all over the place. But right now, it's the value is still on a spectacular stadium that, you know, you had to drain 3 mines of their, you know, precious minerals to build the thing. But, you know, look, it has recycled water, you know, so I mean, it's just sort of all crazy to me. Like what there again, just so like that there is no real truth to it. It's just fiction.
Yeah, well, I would actually go with your last comment. And, you know, when I first met you, were you nihilistic? Were you nihilistic? How do you pronounce that? Nihilistic or nihilistic?
I think it's a potato thing.
Yeah, and were you do you still have first of all, did I get you wrong? Did I sense some nihilism there when I first met you? And are you still nihilistic?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Is my statements up to this point like that it doesn't, it's not like it's meaningless in a way, but I don't know if that's nihilistic, because I'm kind of now in a place, and maybe at the time it was kind of like, it doesn't mean anything, who cares? And now I'm more in a place where it doesn't mean anything, isn't that great? You know, and it's like, because now it's like, I'm not obligated to anything, right? It's like, I can do what I want. I can.
Well, you're obligated to your daughter.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, to dial all back, fundamentally, I mean, yeah, that is a new thing as well from the time I met you. Right. And maybe why I've had a shift in a way too. I mean, to try to see it less like we're all screwed and more like we have a lot of opportunity. Nothing's great in either case, but we're not all screwed. We actually have opportunity.
Yeah, but let me go into that a little bit. Like, and also I could say anyone watching this that doesn't know us is Matt Baran Architecture. He'll tell you his website at some point. So, okay, because I'm partially advertising my friends.
Or Google it. BaranStudioArchitecture.com.
Right. Say that again.
BaranStudioArchitecture.com.
Excellent. Okay. And I also like the fact that your name's Baran. Think about that.
Yeah. Well, meaning, you know,
the desert.
The other, that's correct. The other meaning it has, as a matter of fact, is the opposite of that. In Farsi, it means rain. So Baran is rain. Yeah.
Oh. Do you have Persian background?
No, but I only through marriage and now and divorce.
And the argument might be that we all are from that area of the planet.
Well, there's that too, sure.
Well, so again, you know, like you have you know, some of your speech as I met you and arguably still there has some nihilism to it. But I think that I think it's probably a little contradictory in that you seem to have a lot of faith in improving the world, and that Matt Baran buildings can do something. So let's get into that for a little bit. Like, what does a Matt Baran building?
I mean,
getting to build close? I have to back it up. are you building, is what you're building in your firm, without getting you into too much trouble, close enough to what you believe? Is it close to your heart? That's an important question, isn't it?
Okay, I don't think, I mean, I don't know if any clients will pick this up, but you know, but is it boring to be nihilistic? Like, I guess the thing is, and I had this Robert McGillis, I had a conversation with him the other day, and he and another guy that we recently met, and he was coming from a similar place where he's like, oh, you like helping people, you want to help your clients, you want to make the world a better place. And I don't know if this is the contrarian in me right now, like as you say this, but you know, I feel like a lot of it really comes from like just me wanting to do what I want to do, like what I enjoy doing, you know? And, you know, so it's like, I really enjoy and have always enjoyed making buildings and creating architecture. Now, when you were in school, it meant do whatever you want and you didn't have a client or anything. So, you know, that was when I first stepped into this, it was like, oh, wow, this is incredible. This is exactly what I want to be doing. And of course, that changes the minute you walk out the door of the university and you have your first client or boss or whatever. But I think that, you know, it was never for me a notion, there was no notion of trying to make the world a better place. And in fact, my master's thesis, I struggled to avoid the words like improve or make better. And this is kind of what I was even talking about earlier, this idea that there's good architecture and it's going to fix the world and its problems and everything. I mean, I think that, you know, for me, that master's thesis, which then led into my practice, was always about extracting things, revealing things, you know, laying them bare, you know, in a way that like we took the freeway something. And in fact, you know, again, I'm sorry to keep going back to the Marcus Novak discussion.
No worries. If he sees it, he'll be impressed.
He actually brought up, he's like, there's no reason freeways need to be ugly. And this was why I wanted to have this conversation, because my entire thesis was based on the premise that freeways are not ugly. And that, you know, why do we value the view of Mount Tam or the view of the Golden Gate and not a view of like this glorious 200-foot high soaring twisted mass of concrete, you know, interchange? And for me, that was like, I don't want to say I'm going to make it better, I'm going to tear down the freeway and put the Golden Gate or Mount Tam. I want to say, why don't we reconsider the beauty of this? And then even with the stuff that I've been putting up through Midjourney lately, it's like, what can we reconsider what, in some ways, what is, you know, kind of beautiful in this regard? It's like, wabi sabi was something that I got really interested in for a while, where it was like, especially in American culture, it's a Japanese concept, you know, age has, there's a beauty to
the crack and everything.
Right. And that here, everything has to be new and polished and young and glorious and in its prime. And we have no value for, or no patience for anything that isn't anymore. And that is, again, this kind of societal value that we have been, either it's been imposed upon us or we've created it ourselves, fiction, you know. And so to me, it's like, you know, why is there any one particular thing that's supposed to be beautiful or not beautiful? So revealing something to be beautiful that may not likely be considered, or make it so that it's not, I don't need to improve this or make it better. It's just, we need to sort of see it and accept it, maybe appreciate it in a way. And so to go back to the original idea of like, improve, you know, does my work improve the world? You know, even when I first started the practice, it was working with developers that were working in like the most undesirable sites, right? Like that Border Town project we did, it was in a kind of abandoned skate park under a freeway. And it was like 2 doors down, 2 warehouses, 2 quote unquote ugly warehouses down from that freeway and skate park. And we named it after that project. But it was like, how can we interplay with this and pull and extract things from it and see it as, you know, kind of appreciate it, know it as beautiful? And I think that was successful. So, I mean, maybe in a roundabout way, the way that projects that I work on could improve things, quote unquote, the word I struggle with, is that is to see things that are ordinarily disregarded or discarded as valuable,
Yeah,
and
that's beautiful, Matt. What you just said is some of the just perfectly put.
thank you.
By the way. Yeah, that's Matt Baran for sure. That's good. So I got it out of you, dude.
Yeah, that was fun. So the other, thank you.
I have more to say though.
The other, let's keep going. The other thing, though, I think that you asked that was interesting is like, does the work meet the standard? I mean, I think that what you said was actually really on point in that it never can, right? Like you're always striving to do more and better, but there are almost, I would suggest, moments, right, where this part of the project or this piece of the project was optimal, right? But you can't always pick your clients and your program. And again, I would put it more fundamentally than succeeding or making money. I would put it like I have a daughter, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, so listen to your points before. I was thinking about this as you were talking, is that if an entire city were Matt Baran, everything in it, and maybe we can talk. That's you. I'm talking about someone who appreciates you. So let's say it's San Francisco size. I could even maybe pick one area or something, but for argument's sake, it's a whole city and it's Matt Baran. Okay, I don't consider that awful, and I appreciate. Maybe I have a man crush going here, but
it would be boring. I would have to have you come in and like take at least some part over. I mean,
except that in terms of narcissism, if Jane would probably say, I know what he's going to say now, but if I had, if I had if I had a city to design, I know I'd like it. Well, it wouldn't be awful. That's interesting. Are you telling me that you don't like your own work? You see what I'm saying?
No, I mean,
I like your work a lot, and I think it's coming from that place. Your work is coming from what you said. Yeah, it's coming from that.
But I think it's really interesting. Like you look at architects that have designed cities. You look at Corbu. You look at even something like Chandigarh. Or, like I feel like, or what a good example is.
You're gonna go to Arcasanta.
Moss. Yeah, but Eric Moss, right? The Culver City complex.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah.
Well, see, it feels like Disneyland to me, though. It's like, because I feel like you go in there and it's like, look, it's a cutting edge architecture theme park or something, right? It has no foil. It has nothing to offset, And I think one of the most
that's him, not you.
Right, but
I don't know.
So, I mean, that's the thing. If it were me, I would invite in others, right? Because I think that you need offsetting things, like without bad, there is no good, or vice versa, right? So if you just had if you really thought that everything you did was good and you had all this good thing, there'd be nothing to tell you it was good because it was just all one thing or whatever, right? So one of the things I really enjoy about the work that I do, in practice is I like controversy and I like to fight, but I like the feathers that get ruffled around these projects we do. Like we did an ADU in a front yard. It was the first and probably only in Berkeley because they changed the rules. But right. We do these like very modern kind of stark things next to really historic Victorians or whatever it is, when we can get away with it, and the neighbors come out and they're ready to burn it down, and the historians come out, and I really do enjoy that because it offsets things in this way that I love. I like the contrast, and I like and it's also a part of this whole idea that there is no good or bad, and so why not let when they want to build a Victorian next to my house, I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't like Victorians. They can build a Victorian and I should be able to build a modern house and they can coexist. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that some people think that's kitschy. If you have like, they talk about LA in this way, that it's all these different styles of architecture and there's no consistency. But I value that. I always appreciated that. And so, you know, if it was a whole city, I would definitely want to collaborate with others and have my opportunities and see what other people did. I think that would be the most interesting.
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, sometimes I've been thinking about this a lot too. Like a couple years ago, my 21-year-old son convinced me to sign up for $11 a month for Spotify.
Yeah, it's a good
It's
deal.
like the best thing I've done in years.
Wait, are we plugging for Spotify now?
Look, I'm probably an ad for Facebook, Spotify, and Instagram. So and TikTok. So yeah, I'm a user of all these things. So, and believe me, I know there's plenty of ways of completely critiquing Spotify and all this stuff, of course. But Spotify was the best thing that's ever happened to me in music, because because I could curate. And because it just kept getting, it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. There's so much there. And then, Joe, my son Joe, could send me the latest King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards, whatever.
Is that real?
Yeah, they're an amazing band, by the way. You just got to listen to them. They're probably the best. I really actually think they're probably one of the best new bands on earth.
But
totally good. But anyway, my point was that
I don't know.
it seems to me that if when you interview a lot of rock and rollers, like, people in the popular music business, and let's keep Kanye West out of it. But, but in general, there's an honest appreciation inside the industry. They're generally extremely appreciative of each other. And the spectrum of what constitutes respected popular music, it's like everywhere. It's like huge. It's huge. You have
Especially
bluegrass.
now.
Sure, but you have bluegrass musicians, like Alison Krauss playing with Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, and that's just those guys are already oldsters, but there are countless examples of how it's all big mash. And I wonder if architecture, that's where I wish it was. I don't think it's there, but I think I kind of think you could learn a thing or two at this point from popular music. And you seem to be indicating that in a way.
It's interesting because I think that I posted something just, I think it was today or yesterday. I'm like, again, the Midjourney thing is top of mind right now. But, it was sort of like the question was, it raises questions of authorship. It raises questions of authenticity. And, there are other tools that one uses, right? You model something, you sketch it by hand. Start right there. You have an idea, you start sketching it, and your hand slips or it goes a different way because you're just drawing, and suddenly something new comes into it, and it's like, okay, well, now I see something else here, maybe I'll go down that path. Or you make a mistake in the model and whatever software you're using, and it's like, oh, wait a second, kind of glitches. I've written about this too. And so in a way, you're collaborating already with a piece of software or a pencil, the tool. And so now we're collaborating with AI, which is a much more sophisticated tool at the moment, until I guess it takes over. But
yeah.
Right? But, I see that also with people in my practice. The myth of the sole genius is kind of, or if it's not, should be dead. Because it's become so complex to build buildings, from the initial sketch conception to putting it through software to running an AI prompt to, getting the staff in to help with it, to structural engineers, to everything else. Is there still a singular kind of genius? I know what you're saying, in that, those collaborations in music exist, and they probably don't as much in architecture, but I see more and more of it. One interesting thing, Andrew Cudless, he's Matsis Design. He used to teach at not the academy where we were, but what's the, I'm sorry, CCA. And, you know, I knew him because I think he was our neighbor, and one of the guys that was there is still there, but he has posted these things where he did this project, and it's called Confluence Park, and it's Lake Flato, and it's him, and there's some other architects involved, and I have no idea, honestly don't know who did what, right? I mean,
Nice. Yeah.
you know, you think about, you know, I feel a little guilty sometimes when I post up projects and the developer came along, had the money, bought the site, decided what the program should be, and then said, I'm going to do housing here. And then, can you help me? How many units can I fit? I come up with some math and I put, and he goes back and he goes to the bank and he does other things and he comes back to me and, you know, he's like, I really like bricks or whatever. And then, you know, we pick a color together at some point. There's so much collaboration that exists in ways that, you know, and I think that it's interesting because I've fought it a lot of my career. I probably still fight it because I want to on some level be the sole, you know, kind of genius working on something, and not, you know, I'm not always good with people. I just want to do something and make it what I want and fall in love with it and be done, you know, with that. And there, but more recently, and this is sort of a funny side personal story, but I had cataract surgery. I don't know if I told you
Oh
about
yeah,
that.
you mentioned that. You're too young.
Yeah, it was a genetic thing, and a lot of
Yeah.
time surfing and being in the sun, no sunglasses or protection. So
Yeah, sure. Oh, surfing. You think you got it from surfing?
I think it was genetic. My dad had it at 55, but I got it younger because I was always out there exposed in the sun and
There you go.
snowboarding.
Yeah.
That and there were no, like, you know, ski.
We have to.
So anyway,
are there good surfing glasses? By the way, we got to do. They still don't exist. Like sun surfing. Sir, yeah, of course they should. That's a market. Let's talk about that later.
In the end, what happened is, you know, I had my interest or my ability had faded where I could not really write. You know, writing is a big thing for me, and
Wow.
and my interaction with computers was really, I was struggling, and I couldn't work sketchbook very well anymore. So I kind of, you know, I carried a sketchbook from time I can't remember in school, right, when they beat that into you, and then eventually I started using my phone, and then I couldn't see and I stopped. Well, ever since that surgery, I've been writing. And now I'm carrying a sketchbook again. And to separate the kind of business aspects from the practical ones, I'm sorry, the sort of more personal ones, I flip the book around now. So when I'm in meetings, I write on one side, I flip it around and I open it up and I do these sketches that I've been, you know, posting around and stuff. But the cataracts has given me kind of new opportunities, like new sight. I can draw and sketch again. And it's been life-changing, you know. So I'm kind of getting back to this, where, going back to the original conversation, I can do these things that I want to do, and I have this sort of separate creative outlet that I can just go into a room, sit. Oh, hang on one sec. There we go. Didn't account for the incoming call. That I can go into a room, I can do these things that I want to do, devoid of any constraint, building code, gravity, anything. And whatever the product is, I don't even know. You know, I kind of struggle with that. Is it, you know, because some of it is a little bit risque, let's say, even when I'm drawing, like I'm drawing figures, I'm drawing aliens, I'm drawing, you know, just whatever's coming to my mind. And then, you know, that I don't even know that I could put it out there into the world without getting some kind of, you know, blowback. So it's very much, by almost necessity, my own. And then I can still bring it back. You know, it's like it's a creative outlet. It's a atmosphere that I can give to myself to bring out aspects of architecture, or bring something to my practice that I wouldn't have otherwise, you know. So you know, it's like the whole design of there's maybe some tension, right? When you talk about designing a whole city and doing it the way that you would want to do it versus collaborating and having others involved. I guess for me, I need a little bit of both. I need those moments where I go away, I focus, I do my own thing. You get into like a flow state, right? This idea that everything else disappears and you're just focused on this thing and it's moving, the music's playing and you're trying things and building and you're just coming to your mind and you're putting more into it. And it's like, there's nothing interfering with that. And then you stop and then you go out and you open the door and you go talk to your engineer and
you know what, Matt, except that's still a vision of the city. You could argue that the way you're talking is it's your city, but it's a vision of the city. And your city may just be a little more steampunk than other cities.
Yeah. I guess I still think though, you got to hand over pieces so that you have nothing to do with, that you.
Yeah. I mean, sure. But, there were cities that were being designed by singular individuals during the course of architectural history. We don't exactly know who they all were.
I mean, in some ways there still are. I mean, you look at somebody that does a master plan for something and then they hand over a piece and say, well, it's got to be this tall and this wide. And, then other architects come in and fill it in. But, I think that the thing that'd be most interesting would be like, what would anyone do without real constraints? I mean, I think that so much of why cities end up looking the way they do now is because you have budgets and zoning and gravity.
Well, we all have constraints because it's like the city behind me, that image behind me is I have constraints that are geometric constraints, and how a specific exercise of geometry. But I don't necessarily need constraints. I mean, that's an abstract image. So, and I wanted to go, there's a couple things I didn't want to forget. Like, in terms of like, again, who you are as an architect. Okay. The level, don't you wish that the level of artistry that you're capable of was fully accessed? How about that? That would probably be a better way of.
You're leading this discussion. I see you keep trying to get to this place. No, I understand it. I mean, I think,
but because I think it's tragic. I actually think it's a tragedy. And and part of who you are is making sense of that.
No, I agree. I don't disagree. I think that, you got me. No, I think that, again, like I keep going back to the stuff I've been producing lately. And this is, I would say the surgery happened in roughly, I had 2 separate surgeries, one for each eye. The second eye was done in June. And it's now, so it's 4 months, right? I 2 sketchbooks. I discovered Midjourney. I've been posting all this stuff. And if you look at, I've been drawing and posting. It's like, I've kind of decided Baran Studio Instagram account is my office, right? And Matt Baran Architect is my personal, and I kind of say, okay, I'm going to set.
That's nice. Yeah.
And so what I've been doing on the personal side, I don't think they're totally unrelated, but on the personal side of things, it's been far more what you're talking about as far as maybe artistry. It's like, it's stuff that I would do given my own sort of, it's my desire, it's coming out there. And those are things I'm designing that would be too expensive to build in the real world. They'd be too hard to sell. And when I say sell, I don't mean in a real estate sense even, but sell to a governmental agency or sell to a, whatever kind of thing you build, it all needs to be sold. People need to buy into it. Money needs to come, all that kind of thing. And so I don't worry about that. I'm just making things that I want to make. And so that's become more me and as far as my own artistry and own ideas. And, you know, who knows, somebody comes along and they see we can build things, and they see that this crazy stuff I've been doing, and say, well, why don't we put those two things together? Maybe at some point, you know, it will happen. Some of them are so out there, obviously, that they can't, but, you know, others are more pragmatic. So, you know, but the interesting thing you and I were talking about in this regard now is also, does it need to be built, or does it need to become, you know, materially realized in a way, right? I mean, because I think we were talking a few days ago about the idea that you build a millionaire's 10,000 square foot home on a hill, and his 10 millionaire friends see it, and you design a video game level or a set for a film digitally now, and
Yep.
hundreds of thousands of people are exposed to it.
Maybe
and it's
a billion.
yeah,
Yes.
and you're having more impact doing that than you are doing this kind of brick and mortar, you know, thing. And so, you know, I want to think about this in the future. Maybe, as I'm realizing, even as we're having this conversation, and as I've listened to your other talks, you know, what constitutes the end product? You know, what is it? You know, I kind of used to laugh. I was like, oh, well, paper architecture, you know, like these guys that are just,
Sure. So, yeah, endless, but some of the greatest always.
well, I mean, and I've been revisiting Lead Woods, and, you know,
Yeah,
and his paintings are selling, you know, his drawings are selling for millions of dollars or whatever.
I didn't know that, but I so love his work, man. Yeah, for sure. I've always loved his work. Yeah.
And, you know, and we had this conversation too, which we often do. What's lasting, right? Like, what is our legacy? What do we leave behind? You know, you leave a child behind, they will pass away. Maybe they'll have more children, maybe your DNA, but you'll be gone. You'll be forgotten. Even the architecture you leave behind, you know, ultimately dust, gone. Nobody will ever, even if it sticks around long enough, will anyone ever know who you were or anything like that? Does that matter?
Yeah.
But, you know, there's now this other avenue we're talking about, which is, you know, writing or digital content or whatever it may be. But the other thing is,
the reality, yeah. But
other
I think that the best work, you and I have talked about this too, of course, and that's what, again, hopefully we'll have lots of these discussions over the ensuing years. But I didn't want to interrupt. Sure.
I'm sorry, I have another question for you. Do you, now it is so easy though, right? So, okay, constraints, right? Doing a house, multi-million dollar home on, you know, 10,000 square feet or whatever, getting it through all these hurdles and all these constraints, it's difficult. You can just go now onto Midjourney, and you can tag Midjourney on Instagram and find 10,000 fantastic images. And I'm curious about this too, because it goes all the way back to the earlier conversation about what's good or bad in architecture. And it's like, when now there are no constraints, I mean, you know, there are these images that are produced of architecture. I mean, even arguably before Midjourney and algorithmic architecture, parametric architecture, these fantastical images. And is it too easy suddenly? You know, because you can go on and everybody's doing it, right? I mean, it's like some kid out of high school in Minnesota is posting these parametric, you know, that, you know, and he typed in Journey parametric house, you know, and came out really cool. Yeah. And so, you know, it's like, if you're talking about kind of how do you set yourself apart in terms of greatness? It's almost like when everything is of this crazy quality and everyone can produce it, how do you discern anymore?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as far as taking that conversation forward, the idea of the multiverse to me is actually inside virtual. You know, it's where it's where Zuckerberg kind of wants to go, but he doesn't. I think he needs to talk to more architects, in my humble opinion. But
it's not great.
No, and I think there's going to be an infinite amount of universes. I think we're human beings are actually going to be creating the multiverse through it's partially already happening, but it's really going to go into overdrive.
But is it going to be good?
It's going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be, there'll be architects who are trained intensely at imagining space, who will be developing multiverses, and there'll be some 5-year-old who likes gigging around, and maybe his stuff might be pretty cool in its own way too. I suppose, I don't know, but I think that
will the world be a better place? Will it be a better place?
But I think that another friend of mine who was in one of these discussions already, Samer Al-Sayari, he said one of the more profound things to me during one of these discussions. He said that utopia and dystopia are interwoven. I'm paraphrasing, but are interwoven together always. That's in effect what he said.
This is metamodernism, the metaverse.
Yeah, and that you can't let go of the dystopic. It's just there. It always finds a way in. And the thing is, we're partially, these primates that were cannibals. That if you look back, actually,
Meat.
Yeah, we ate what we could get. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, there were this idea of ultraviolence. I mean, it's part of our DNA, for God's sake. It's inside us. And granted that you could argue that we have to resist its worst affect, but it's there. It's still denying that it's there is what gets us into trouble, I think.
I mean, it's interesting because when I look at, again, what you've been posting, I feel like it's very optimistic. Like some of the stuff you've been generating with AI has been, I feel like very, I feel like the stuff that everything I've done has always been, there's a certain anger and violence to it. And I think that it comes from me. I think that there are things that I'm still grappling with, and I've gotten much better over time, but the forms have been aggressive and, and kind of angry and angular and dark. And, I feel like I've moved past a lot of that in my personal life, but the visual aspect of it is still very appealing to me. I don't know what draws.
That's great though. You see that, but and the thing is, I'm going to be lecturing on for want of better terminology, synesthetics. Architecture is music. And what you've been playing around with on AI, it's kind of like heavy metal, but it's a version. It's a certain and of course there are now classes of heavy metal, but
or whatever. It's amazing because my 8-year-old daughter listens to Korn or bodies hit the floor.
That's great.
So it's fundamentally, as you say, it's in us. Like and I try, even with her, I try to explain, like, okay, you people get angry. It's an emotion, right? Just as much as we're capable of loving, we're capable of getting angry. And it's kind of, what do you do with the anger, right? But you're not going to eliminate it. You're not going to make it go away. And much like this entire conversation we've been having, you almost need it, right? To know that happiness doesn't exist without, disappointment or sadness. You need the contrast to know what something is. If you're, it's the old joke, it's like how the two fish meet up in the morning and it's like, how's the water today? And the other fish is like, what's water? It's like, if you're surrounded by it at all times, you never know there's anything else. And so you need those contrasts and those oppositions at point.
In talking to you as we get into these discussions, and then again, hopefully there'll be a few more versions of this, but
if this one doesn't pan out, after you look at it again.
Oh no, this panned out. I'm already totally happy.
Another wrap it.
We'll do many more, sure. But I think that listening to you, I think architecture, is architecture among the most suppressed of the arts? That I think that it may be,
Well, because it has so many constraints, right? I mean, we talk about constraints, but even like the technology dating back, wood frame construction, all this kind of stuff, it's like, it has so much baggage. It's been around for too long or something, I don't know. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
art, any kind of art has music, the same thing. It has the same history. I don't know, but I would agree.
The society allows music to cut loose. They let it cut loose. But there was this period when rock and roll was new, when there was problem.
Sure, but is it because? Yeah, but is it because of the functionality of it, though? I mean, again, sorry, Marcus Novak. I never understood why people didn't consider architecture art, and I get that, and I understand architecture as art. However, it has functions to serve, right? I mean, like there's commerce in a way. I mean, there's it's got to stay dry. It's got to, stay warm.
Yeah.
Got to have air, whatever, currency. That was the word I was searching for. Which has many meanings, but it's like, there is a different standard to which it's held. I mean, it's like car design or something, right? It's like, that's an art form, but it's got to have four wheels. It's got to roll. It's got to have an engine. You got to sit in. So
I think we probably do share a lot with car design. And actually, Elon Musk may be producing an electric environment that has finally completely given the user everything.
I'm gonna
spatially.
I'm gonna Corvette, the V8 engine, the sound of the engine, and the smell of the burning fuel, though, I gotta say.
Right. But I mean, the automobile is a very good competitor to what architecture provides, I think.
Yeah, except wasn't there some, I guess the controversy was about between like Bill Gates a long time ago, Bill Gates comparing computers to cars and how fast the technology, right? What is it, Moore's law, where the technology doubles every 6 months or something, and it computers are moving like quantum leaps ahead. And there was this discussion between automakers and these tech guys, and they said, why can't cars keep up with computers? Like, we can do this with those machines, why not these? And I don't remember what the answer is, but then don't bring an architect to the table, because they're behind by centuries or something, or decades.
I know, but it's like society. But that was kind of my point, is I don't know if society wants to let us go. That's true.
I mean, you said in your Marcus Novak talk that you're still trying to get to Frank Lloyd Wright. I can't build a kind of flat roofed home down the block here because my two neighbors are Victorians, and they're not okay with me doing it.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's I think it's very frightening what architects can really imagine to society at large. I don't think it makes it almost anywhere. I think, where is Zaha? Zaha's been building, ZHA has been building a lot in China, of all places. And the Communist Party seems to be able to open itself up to the craziest work. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Do you think of their stuff? I mean, before, now, when she was still alive, or even now, do you think that's good architecture?
It's again an excellent question, because you have to compare it to other classes of work that's like that. I think that's what you got to do. And there's very little that has aspired to really build what was getting drawn to that extent. And let's say Rhino at its limit, take Rhino to its limits, and then see if you can build it. And so they did merge. In talking to Helmut Kinsler, he confirmed for me that they started to merge with car manufacturers, that they're actually. Oh,
that was the Gary thing at Disney, right? That was Katia.
Oh, I didn't know that Gary yeah. Had worked with car manufacturers. Yeah, not surprising.
Yeah, so, I mean, at least with the software, I don't know how they were, fabricating it, but I know the software.
Oh yeah. Oh, you mean Katia or Katia, whatever it's called. Yeah, I've mispronounced it for years, probably.
Well, maybe. or I have.
Yeah, I didn't know that that was automobile related, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that in terms of techne, misappropriating language that Ken Frampton taught me at Columbia, but I mean, like, tectonics, techne, how things are put.
I've been using that word a lot again lately, and I've always hated it, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so Zaha's firm ZHA has worked really hard to make it look good when you look close. It's really something. And much as I love Stephen Hull's work a lot, when you started to look at his stuff closely, the details weren't there. Like on the MIT dormitory, it doesn't matter how it happened. I don't know. He might tell us. He said that he might say that I'm disappointed in the contract. I have no idea. But that same lack of techne exists with Bjarke Engel's work, the one that I saw. I'm sure he's getting better, but the hotel, there's a big disconnect.
My work, I've had to embrace that lack of, the quality of detail, and we've actually won awards on that premise. I was like, I mean, no, they've actually
beautiful, amazing lack of detail.
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. We had a jury on more than one occasion say that it's not treated as precious, like that it's like there's no, this corrugated metal just came and they cut it off and it ended, and it's like another piece came here and it ended. And right. They called our shipping container project like it's probably politically incorrect, but they called it the ghetto Pompidou, and so.
And I love that project. That's a great little piece.
It was the rawness of the stuff was the thing, and I always loved Frank Gehry. In some ways, I love Frank Gehry's earlier work more because of its. It's like you look at the.
That's great. Yeah.
That was torn down, now, or the Hollywood Library, where, and they would show, I remember being in class, I cannot find this detail for the life of me. I'm sure that Frank Gehry burned it or something, but it was like, there'd be two pieces coming together and there'd be an angle here and it'd be like the dimensioned at somewhere between 30 and 40 degrees, it's like close enough. And that's,
that's it.
And so what's amazing is that if somebody like Frank Gehry can imagine, if it's between 30 and 40 degrees, it would be good enough. And then you have a piece of architecture and it was never that specific or precise. And it was still Frank Gehry's work. I've kind of always felt that way about my own stuff. I've never treated it as precious. I've never thought I'm the genius. Everything has to be exactly where I've placed it. It's like, if it's about like this, it'll be pretty cool. I'll be happy with it.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. I think that at this point, ZHA is definitely, although, again, maybe in some future discussion with ZHA, they'll refute this, but I think that at this point, just like Frank Gehry, Frank Gehry's in his 90s, of course, but whatever, if someone inherits Frank Gehry's firm, it's like, given enough recognition and certainly enough money, then a lot of these architects really go for fine detail that equates with automobiles. So your concept actually wouldn't work with a car. Zaha's stuff you could totally put in a car, plane, boat, you name it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting because
spaceship.
We're talking about this, and you think about Zaha, and it's was original. You think about her trajectory, and you think about the Santa Monica School. You think about Tom Main, and at the time I was living in LA, and it was like he'd do a planter in a hospital or a little pop out on an existing office building, and people were crazy about it, and it was great stuff. And to see the trajectory on which all these architects went, Zaha, from not really building anything to doing the fire station to doing these stadiums. Now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess the question is what are you judging what are you basing the judgment on these projects on? And it's like, is it originality? It's like, if somebody came along now and did Zaha better than Zaha, would it still be, would it necessarily be good? And especially as
no one can come along and do it. Zaha, whatever Patrick Schumacher's doing, whatever those guys are figuring out,
Yeah.
No one can just come along and do that. That's a very interesting point, you know.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I think that people are trying to copy that stuff, and whether they're doing it successfully is all relative. But what I'm kind of talking about now, though, is like, like Frank Gehry's thing when people are like, why do you do the same potato chip building over and over again? And his answer was, you can't just go and invent a new architecture every day, right? And so, you know, does somebody need to come along now and invent something even newer? And we talked about Tom Wiscombe, and we've talked about, you know, even Bjarke Ingels or whatever, and people are coming along and they're trying to one up, and it's being one upped in spectacle. But going back to this idea of society as the judge and decides what's important and what's good, is that even going to be the metric anymore? I was listening to another podcast, or I saw some snippet from it, and I went back to it because I was so fascinated. So it's these, you know, younger people talking about architecture. And one of the things that they were discussing was, how do you evaluate good architecture? And again, whatever that means. And they had 6 things. They said relationship to site, program, relationship to people or culture, technical integrity, sustainability, and beauty. And
sounds really boring, actually.
right. But now, see, you and I are old, right? And so now, as the society shifts and new people come in, and it's like they've been told all their lives that the planet is dying and that there's massive amounts of inequality in the world. You now need to address it as an architect, or in whatever you do. And so you get people coming into the studio. How are you changing the world? How are you making things different? Not just by doing beautiful architecture, because beauty is only one of the 6 factors, but how are you creating, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion? How are you creating sustainability? How are you doing all these other things with your architecture? And so, is Zaha Hadid relevant anymore when, and I, not to, you know, like trigger you, or,
No, it's fine.
but, you know, it's like, is it relevant anymore when she comes out and is like, well, so what if 200 workers died on our project, 500 died on that one down the street? So, you know, we made a beautiful building. Like, you know, that was a controversy for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, as far as relevancy is concerned, like you spoke about this a little bit earlier. And by the way, we're going on 6:06, but I'm enjoying this a lot.
Yeah, no, let's go. I go meet somebody shortly, but I'm.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can go a few more minutes, but
yeah, no,
you know, I do think that when you take the long view, again, when you take the long view, you begin to operate. This is kind of a Zen attitude or whatever, Buddhist attitude, but when you take the long view, you begin to operate more effectively from the point of loss. So the idea being that the long view is a geological layer. The really long view is, you know, the sun supernovas, goodbye everything. And why do we have we are so full of illusion that we think, I mean, and you know what? The earth is probably, the sun is gonna, before its supernovas, at about less than a billion years. I have to read up on this, but I read about it, you know, a while ago. Something like 1 billion years, that's it. Then the earth will certainly be uninhabitable.
Right.
And, you know, so do we mean nothing? It's the wrong question, because of course, in that sense, we mean nothing.
Well, and that's why I think I'm going to do what I like. How do I get to like do what I enjoy while I'm here? You know, like I don't.
That's great. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I don't need to I don't need it to last forever. I don't need to somehow leave. Because we'll all be gone. We'll all be forgotten. I mean, it's like, why do I get mad why do I even let it bother me that my daughter cannot get to school on time ever? Like, why does it bother me so much? You know, like I get all worked up. I'm like, come on, we gotta go. And it's like, what? I walk away after, and I'm like, why do I care so much about all this meaningless stuff, right? That's been like onto me. And so just, you know, find ways to find ways to the joy, you know, like the good stuff that makes you feel good. It's not right or wrong. I mean, you go back to relevancy, right? It's like, I don't know, Zaha, is that right or wrong? Because it wasn't green enough, or there wasn't enough inclusion in the project or whatever, you know, the times change, we see things differently tomorrow. It will be
Well,
something.
you know, and I wonder though, if Frank Lloyd Wright didn't just think fundamentally different than the way we think now, and Le Corbusier too, where they thought of everything of the world differently, that there was some type of significant limit so that what Frank Lloyd Wright was creating would really live forever in some way.
It won't, as we know, it won't.
It
But
won't. Right.
Point will he be canceled? Is what I want.
He's already partially been canceled. I mean, that's interesting. That's a good point.
You know, it's like, but all he cared about was, you know, all he cared about was making beautiful forms, and that's not good enough anymore. We don't care about him.
That's right. Right. That's as good an answer as any. Maybe we can go to part 2 from here.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna run over and see another friend of mine, and let's continue the conversation. This is great. I mean, you know, if it lasts forever in cyberspace, it doesn't matter.
But it's been a lot of fun talking to you, Matt. And let's definitely go for a round 2. Sounds great.
Yeah, to be continued.
Yeah, have a nice evening, man. Yeah, talk to you soon.
All right, bye.